All right, everybody, we're back. And you know what it is. It is the Transition Podcast, Man to God. And I'm your host, Rashad McCants. And we have another guest, a very special guest. Again, all my guests are special. So y'all have to understand, if I haven't had a personal run-in with these guests, they're people who I want to run into. And this person that I have up next is and was a good agent of mine throughout the years of me playing. And today's topic, we're getting into understanding athletes, understanding agents, understanding the basketball industry, ins and outs of college to the NBA, and nobody better that I know of to give all the young guys who are looking to find a way into this industry, whether it be sports management, being an agent, being a mentor, being a manager. There's nobody better than my special guest, Mr. Jeremiah Haylett. Please welcome yourself. Thank you for coming on. Give us a little
No,
introduction, man. How you
thank
doing
you for
today,
having me.
man? What's going on?
Yeah, no, it's been good. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure representing you, for a number of years. Through ups and downs. I remember, Venezuela, to be honest, getting a call late at night, like, dude, you got to get me out. Like this, this shit ain't working. So no, it's been good. And then your book, that process, some of the sizzle stuff for some of the television shows we've been involved with. So it's been cool. Even the big three, and then you just being like, I'm done. Like I'm done
Oh
with this. I
man.
don't want to do this anymore. So
And just to
uh,
interject on that, everybody, that Jeremiah, just he was the actual guy who helped me get the book off the table, off the ground, opportunity to actually tell my story, plantation education on all platforms right now. Jeremiah was the leading source for me actually getting a person that can push me into the direction. And that's why I have to have him on. But let's jump into it, man. Let's jump into it. Texas is your base, right? Correct? Even
right,
being in
Dallas,
Texas,
Texas. Yeah.
big time basketball state. Tell us how you got into being an agent, man. Tell us how you got this just hunger for wanting to represent players, and even being involved in basketball.
So the representing players kind of happened, I would say, in college. I had a track friend that ran track at Prairie View A&M, where I did my undergrad, and HBCU. But he wasn't doing so well with grades, academics, that kind of stuff. And they were just going to drop his scholarship and find somebody else. And to me, it seemed weird that they would take all this time recruiting this kid, getting his academic stuff, getting everything in order. And as soon as he fails a couple classes, they don't offer him a tutor. They don't get him somebody else to, help his grades or move him to a remedial class. They just talk about pulling the scholarship. And that seemed poorly thought out, and like he needed somebody in his corner to kind of fix that process, to kind of advocate on his behalf. So that's what initially got me interested. And, I tutored him in a couple classes that I was in with him, and he ended up maintaining his scholarship. Shout out to Walter. But no, it was that I was like, oh, these guys just don't have somebody that has a good voice in their corner. A lot of them are just telling them what they want to hear. Like, oh, you should do this and you should do that, with almost no knowledge of whatever the business is or the entity is. In the industry, it's kind of considered, the hanger on types. And I'm sure, you're familiar with it. How many people have kind of come and gone in your life from,
Yep.
touching the league, and then, not in the league, and people aren't around anymore.
Yep. 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 And that everybody has to take note that that's just how the nature of the game is you get out there, you show your worth, you either used up to the amount that They don't need you anymore. You're used up to the amount that they can't get enough of you. Can't move without you. And that's an unfortunate part of the business. Let's also talk about the college side. We talk about how early these guys are being targeted. Let's talk about the access now that the agents have to the actual college students and the actual high school students,
Yeah.
that they can, begin vetting the process of, curating what that lifestyle would be for the athlete. Do you think that there's a certain exploitation for the agent now that they have this type of access? What do you think is the positive side for the agent in getting in early and being able to facilitate how this athlete's career can go? What's the positive side of that? We know that in the negativity is can be, you exploit them and kind of steer their career whatever way that you want as an agent. And we've heard the nightmare stories of those, but we rarely hear the positive stories of that guy who steers their career to the positive side and flourishes and, all that. What does that look like?
So I think on the positive side, as long as it's, a good agent, honest agent, respectful agent, he has the opportunity, if he can get a kid early enough, young enough, to mentor him on the correct steps to take, the correct school to decide on, instead of just, a big splash and pan, like, oh, go to Kentucky because of this. And it's like, well, maybe you're not a Kentucky type guy. You're not a 5-star guy. Maybe you're a 4-star. So go to a mid-major and just absolutely kill it. And you'll be in the exact same draft, in the exact same lottery as, somebody from Kentucky. So I think that's one of the positives that doesn't get spoke about enough. And then just, teaching them how to be a man, how to read people, how to, interact on a professional manner, and you see it with the younger and younger kids now. Everybody wants to just text. And it's like, if you're dealing in the business world, you're either going to have to do a face-to-face, you're going to have to get on the phone. You've got to do business like business. And then the other thing is having uncomfortable conversations, and being comfortable having uncomfortable conversations and having disagreements and still being friends and, pleasant to one another, even after you have a disagreement. And the kids today, I'm seeing a lot of them, they'll just ghost and they'll just disappear and try and move on to the next person.
So how do you separate the personal aspect from the business? Because there's a lot of times that there's stories where the athletes trust the agent to do everything in the power of, the power of attorney and being able to do endorsement deals, be able to do X, Y, and Z. And they begin to trust, the agent as a personal friend. And some stories are, where they trust, and, like my story early on, I didn't have an agent per se, but it was more so of a manager who I gave the trust to, and they came in, took advantage of the situation, got out scot-free. How does an athlete shift through that at the trust issues of meeting someone who's trying to sell them on, look, I want to take your career and I want to help it flourish, and I've done it from XYZ to these guys, and I want you to be next. How does a player, how does an agent earn the trust of the player?
It's difficult to say because it's different for each kid. Sometimes you got to win over the family, and then the family's a big piece of it. Sometimes it's a trainer or a random coach. Sometimes it's just a kid, and you almost notice a personal chemistry with the athlete. Like, hey, we grew up kind of similar. We have the same ideology, like we have the same outlook on life. And I don't feel like this agent bullshits me, like he shoots me straight. Right. Some guys don't want to hear that, and I had somebody explain it to me. Some kids like normal green beans, some like French cut green beans. And the French cut ones is, I'm going to tell you exactly what you want to hear, whether it's truth or not, and just hype you up. Yep. And some kids want to be pumped up like that because that's what they think an agent does. And, later on in their career, they find out either the work's not being done or the connections aren't there.
Right.
They just said whatever to get you signing on a dotted line. But something I let parents and kids know early on is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't have your agent be your financial manager and your business manager and doing all that stuff.
Right.
So for me, I handle all the basketball stuff and endorsement stuff. I set up meetings. So say you're in Vegas, I'll set you up with a financial guy, and we'll do 3 or 4 interviews with financial guys that have a good reputation, no dings on their record, and accredited, certified financial planners in your area, so you can have that personal relationship with them.
Right.
Because you don't want somebody having complete control over your life. Because if things go poorly, they can either hold you hostage or do a lot of damage.
Mm. So I think another key point here is, for you and your resume, you're also an attorney. And as an attorney, how important is it to be both attorney agent in the climate of the name, image, and likeness for the NIL and the NCAA's whole, opening up Pandora's box? I've always, in the book, we talk about how important it is to have an attorney present when you're signing the national letter of intent, and that it's a voluntary document that can hold you accountable for breaking rules and regulations that you didn't know existed because you signed ultimately a contract without parental discretion or any kind of legal counsel present. I've always had that problem with that particular aspect of the national letter of intent. And as I was doing my research on the book, I found out that it was a voluntary document. You didn't have to sign it. And that if you were 17 years old and you were signing it without your parents there,
Doesn't matter.
it is a voided contract. It doesn't even, it doesn't matter. But no one knows. We're not talking about it. It's not a concern. So I would like to ask you, like, as an attorney, and having that one up and being an agent as well, how do you facilitate, having that advantage approaching these college athletes, knowing that the name, image, and likeness is so important?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that NIL thing is really interesting. And like you said, it's a Pandora's box. And if you don't have somebody that knows the ins and outs of, all right, the NCAA rules are this, and they used to be this, and they've changed. So now we can do this, this, and this, entering the draft and then pulling your name back out, knowing the specific dates that you need to do that. Like, it's very detail oriented. And, somebody that's got like an MBA or a JD or something like that, that's something that they've had to do in school already. It's just detail, detail, detail. And if you miss a detail, it's serious. So to take somebody that either just has a bachelor's and they just kind of coasted through school, I think they're at a little bit of a disadvantage because they haven't had to read through those type of rules constantly and be familiar with kind of the changes that happen in the industry. What's your thoughts on the name, image, and likeness stuff that's going on? Do you see it as positive? Do you see it as negative overall?
I personally, it's one of those situations where we're not talking about the education, right? So if we're doing it for the money, we're doing 360. We're doing a 360. We're like, oh, pay us, pay us, pay us. We'll be okay with not getting the education. And then we're circling all the way back, complaining about how we're always broke. We don't know how to spend our money. We're being taken advantage of. After 5 years of your contract, you're looking like, well, I ran out of money. I didn't know what I was doing. I got taken advantage of here, here, and here. I don't know nothing about real estate or investing or saving. These are things that can be taught in college, right? These things can be a part of programs that, while monetizing your name, image, and likeness, you're learning how to monetize your name, image, and likeness. It's not like they're doing it for you and you're not learning anything in the meantime. You're learning how to bring value not only to your name in the content that you provide and create, but also taking that content and that rapport that you have on your name and being able to use that value into the real estate market, into the advertising market, and being able to monetize opportunities now in the real world, whether it be construction or travel. Now your likeness can be monetized outside of the game, and that can be taught to you while we're in school, while we're coming, while we're playing. And I
Yeah.
think if we can show that type of support for the educational aspect like we are for the athletic process, I think that it can be something to promise, but I don't think that we're ever going to get past the capitalism of it. We're capitalizing off of, talent, opportunity, and we're capitalizing off potential, but we're not capitalizing off education. That's my only issue with it because it's all being promoted from people who
Yeah.
didn't step in the mud,
Yeah.
per se. They had, that, I guess how I say that golden spoon, eating off the golden spoon when it was you walk right through, no trials and tribulations, nothing taken away from them. And when you have to fall back on something like an education that was promised to you in college, and it's not there, and then you go back and try to figure out why, and you're like, well, it's not here because they promised us this, and they say they gave us this, and none of it all plays out. So I feel like the NIL has to have some type of blanket for the athlete to have some type of education to fall back on.
Yeah. Well, to me, I get the feeling that the NCAA did the NIL to distract from the conversation.
Yep.
The conversation that, had already been started and was pretty far down the line of getting compensation for the athletes. And you and I have talked about it for years that you don't have to pay the kids $5,000-$10,000 a month. Like you get them a stipend, a couple grand a month. Like you do the same thing for an academic scholarship kid that's working at the library on campus, and all he's got to do is go to class, and he's on an academic scholarship. So why can't you do the same for an athlete that's spending 20, 30, 40 hours a week in the gym producing money? Like the kid in the library is not making the school any money working
right.
in the library. Like the athletes are making a lot of money for the school. So
that's the
it felt like it was just a distraction.
If you look at the incentive, you say, okay, the kids that have a problem are the kids that are making us the money. The kids that are, raising hell about, hey, give us some money for what we're doing, they're the ones making the university more prestigious to attend for the regular student. So we bring more value than just being a guy who's playing ball at the school or just another mouth to feed in the lunch hall. We're bringing the most value to the university as a whole, because the moment you give me a scholarship and we're on TV for that first season, all of those students who see our record, see us playing in the national championship game, and they want to come to our school now.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a culture.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not just the media rights and everything else that the NCAA and the schools making money on. They're making money on tuition of bringing in people that just want to go to, a prestigious basketball school, football school, baseball, like whatever that student is interested in. They want to go to that school because it's where some of their favorite athletes went. No, that's a valid point. And the distraction part of it annoyed me. And, I thought it was an interesting thing that you brought up is that these kids could just be rolled into a class. All your football kids, all your basketball kids, like roll it into a class, teach them a little bit of business school skills of, hey, this is how to monetize, your NIL. This is how to market yourself a little bit more. When you get some money, this is how to invest it. Like this is some things to look at. And you don't have to tell them what to do, but at least expose them to, these are the positives, these are the negatives. Like, yeah, you can invest in crypto. Cool. But these are the risks. You can invest in stocks, but these are the risks. And, you just expose them as much as possible. And that gives professors an easy entry road into, this is how it's applicable in your life right now. Yep. You're an NIL kid.
Yep. So, oh, that's perfect, man. So let's also get into the NBA, man. Let's get into young college graduates that maybe have sports management degrees and trying to facilitate what they want to do with the next steps And you know, like I know, there's a lot of sports fans that end up being sports management majors that love the game, want to get into it, want to start representing players, so on and so forth. Looks all, bright and shiny on the outside, right? Looks like, oh, I want to do it. I can be next to these guys and represent them. And tell us about the grueling grind of being an NBA agent. There's the college side where you're getting these guys out of college, and that net and that web is a little bit bigger than those finely tuned top 10, top 20, top 25 guys that are coming out every year.
Yeah.
And you get you a nice little NBA guy. Talk about that process of representing an NBA player, what that looks like as far as talking to the teams, the culture of it all.
Yeah. So, I mean, recruiting kids, it's gotten easier, but it's gotten more difficult at the same time. Like social media has made, recruiting and accessibility to the younger generation that much easier, because you can type it into TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, and you can, get direct contact with the kid. And then, the recruiting process that way has become easier just with getting contact, but it also has made it infinitely more difficult because now everybody with a social media account thinks they're an agent.
Yeah.
And they pay their little registration fee and take their test with the NBA, and now they're an agent. They haven't represented anybody. They don't know a clue of what they're doing other than what the test said.
Right.
And on the test, I'm sorry, they don't have all 30 GM's phone numbers on the test. And there's years of relationships and everything else. So and I get emailed a lot about, what can I do to become an agent? This is what I want to do, yada, yada. And it's like, you just do it at the end of the day. Like you just step in and you start doing it. And it's interesting to see how many people ask about that and then how many people test the waters and then 2 years from now aren't doing it anymore. And, I've seen hundreds of people that hit me up, say they're going to do it. They start doing it. And the washout rate is huge,
right?
Huge, just because it's such a steep learning curve, but it's such a competitive environment. Like literally everybody that likes sports wants to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what they think, though. They think it's, you and I are hanging out every day.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to the gym together, and then we're going, we're flying to this workout. And it's like, no, like, it's not how it is. Like most time you're in the office, you're on the phone, you're grinding it out, trying to figure out like, all right, what's the best fit? And you start breaking down rosters and you start analyzing contracts and you start trying to figure out like, what's the best place to move my guy to where he's going to have the most upside.
Talk about how important it is to actually have those relationships though, like with those GMs, even if it's just that one. What type of leverage that holds for you, even if you're an agent just starting in and you finally get that conversation with that one GM, you got that number, what does that do for your confidence? Where do you go from there? Like, how do you navigate from there?
Yeah. So the hard part is not getting too big headed. And like it started out, I was working with a larger agency. We were doing the Morris twins. And, both of them come out in the same year. So I was getting blown up with workouts. Everybody wanted to work them out. So you got to start narrowing down, where they're going to go. Because you don't want the kids doing 30 workouts in 20 some days. Like you're gonna tear them up.
Right.
So and you figure out where their draft rank's going to be, and you kind of focus in on that. But everybody's your friend when you got a lottery pick.
Mm-hmm.
Every GM wants to work them out. Every GM wants to see them.
Yeah.
But then, when you're calling about a pick 61 kid the next year, who answers your phone? Like that's when the writing's on the wall and, they show their true colors of who they are and, if they can really help you out. And you just don't know automatically. Like you have to have that high level guy. You have to have that low level guy. And you get to figure out like, all right, who's genuine? There was an assistant GM. He was player personnel at first at Cleveland. And then he went to the Hawks and got an assistant GM role there. And he just got big headed, and he got rude, and he got honestly kind of disrespectful.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that little bit of success goes to some people's head, and they can't keep humility in their life.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out so well for him. He ended up being let go, and I think he's back with another team now. But it's just, you got to keep humility in your life, whether it's on an athlete side or on an agent side or on a team side. You got to be a man, you got to be honest, and you got to keep yourself humble.
Man, I love it. I love it. So that's a perfect segue for what we need to talk about next, which is how players transition when it comes to the mentality from college to pro. And I know you've seen a lot of these different ones. As agents, you guys get the most calls about, hey, man, this is it's track. Like, I can say I've called you and said, hey, man, I'm only going to be here for a couple months, man. There ain't no way I'm going to be able to stay here and deal with this side of it. And it's like, when you're spoiled and entitled, as I was, and I can admit that because the NBA was my goal and I didn't want to be anywhere else. So when you're spoiled with that mentality and you get to other places, they don't really chime up to what you really expect, and you find every excuse in the world to get out of the situation because it's just it's not ideal.
Yeah.
But psychologically, there is a breaking point. There is a wall that you're going to hit, and especially playing overseas, you represent a lot of players overseas. Let's talk a little bit about that psychological standpoint that you constantly have to work with guys to understand and to stick it out a little bit longer. You might find some bright spots if you stay another week or two, give you a little bit of edge, give you a little bit of reason to calm down. And I think personally, being in all the positions you put me in, which is I'm so grateful that you were able to help me become a more cultured man, being able to put me in so many different diverse situations that I had to adjust to. And it is not like you did it on purpose. I'm glad that I don't hold that against you, that you would put me in them situations on purpose. But we took advantage of them because, these were opportunities that were in front of us that could possibly lead to other situations. And that's why I consider you such a good agent, because you always looked at it that way. It was never, this is the end situation, we're going to be here for the next 4 years. This was, look, let's take this next 3-4 months, build on it, let's create a highlight film, see how we can get and set up the next opportunity. We don't want to be here. It's not ideal for us, but we got to use it somehow. Talk about that psychological standpoint that you have to kind of guide guys through.
Yeah. And I would say kind of the word that sums that up the most is just professionalism. And I preach it to my guys constantly, and they hear professional and it's like, oh yeah, I'm professional. Like I'm professional. And it's like, all right.
No, you're not. No, you're not, but you're not.
Yeah. When the team's not paying, you're not scoring well, team's losing, coach is in your shit, and you're just getting blown up on social media by all the fans that you're trash. How do you handle that situation?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what professionalism. Yeah. When all that stuff goes wrong, can you still hold your head up, go to practice on time, do everything that you're supposed to? That's what professionalism is.
Hey, I love that expression, the way you break it down. I look back, and that's what can get you fired. Being unprofessional. It's nothing else. Coming into practice, when you have that mean mug and you have that I don't want to be here energy, they see that. They're not dumb. They see it, and that you're not being a professional. You're being rude to everyone. You're not smiling. You're not passing the ball. You're being a ball hog. You're not being professional.
Yeah. And especially you guys overseas, you stand out. Like most of the time you're playing in other cultures that aren't your race, aren't your nationality, so the way you speak, the way you look, the way you carry yourself, it's always under some type of scrutiny. Mm-hmm. So if you aren't conducting yourself with a smile on your face and on time and everything else, they automatically have this impression of, oh, he's just an arrogant American,
Yep.
or, it's because he's black, or,
Mm-hmm.
there's always some excuse. And so I'm having these conversations with teams as well, at the same time that I'm talking about players, like, hey, stay professional. I'm having the same conversation with teams and coaches and GMs, like, he's American. Like, give him a break. Like, this is what he means when he says this. Like, if he's late, just be honest with him. Let him know, hey, you're late. Don't be scared of him because he's bigger than you or
Right.
stronger than
Right.
you. Like, man to man, have a conversation. It's going to be awkward. Like, there's going to be some anxiety on your side and on the player side, but that's part of just interacting now. And we in our society, we're talking about this toxic masculinity type stuff, and it's like, no, there's some huge benefits to not being afraid of confrontation. And I don't mean confrontation like getting in a physical fight. I mean, if it leads to that, that's what happens. But being able to step in front of somebody and say, you're messing up,
Yeah.
you're like, and this is how you fix it, but I'm gonna call you out. And you and I had that conversation a few times. Lebanon, for example.
Yep.
Rashad, you're messing up.
Yep.
Like, we got to do better. Let's check this box, this box, this box. If things continue to go wrong, we'll move to the next one. But we got to better ourselves,
Man.
Before we ask the team to better themselves.
That's the most important aspect of it all, is accountability. Is being accountable for the things that you do. And when you talk about psychologically, I've been cut from every team that I played for overseas. And you got to have thick skin in business. And I think that's the one thing that athletes don't understand, the commonality between playing and then business. And it's more business overseas than anything, because you're contracted to come in and do a specific job. And if you don't do it, you'll be fired. And usually in America, there's that lingering procrastination on both sides, whether I fire you or not, whether I come in and continue to do a good job or not. Overseas is different. So your accountability is one that has to kick in very quickly, because, I was cut on the internet more than 4 or 5 times, where they didn't come up to you and tell you, this is what's going on. This is the problem. We need you to fix it. They don't give you a heads up on things that they don't like about what you're doing and none of that. They see it. They make the call. They replace you. So being a professional and having the psychology of being cut play a part is big for the athlete, because once you've been cut once, it's something that lingers in the back of your mind when you start to see the energy shift. You start to see things move in a certain way that they moved before when you were cut, and you start to have that anxiety, like, man, what else can I do to not get cut? Not because I don't want to get cut. It's more so because I need this money. I need this money, and I want to get cut. I don't want to feel
rejected.
And you don't don't want to be embarrassed.
Yeah. And it plays more into that ego type thing, instead of what it should be of, growing towards a common goal of just winning games and doing the best for a team. And that's something international teams, I think, struggle with, is happy players play the best.
Yes.
So you threatening, like, hey, we're going to cut you if you don't, do well. If you don't put up 20 this game, we're going to cut you. And a lot of teams think, like, well, we're doing this to motivate him. And it's like, you don't motivate through fear. Like, there's a small percentage of people that do well being motivated by fear, but the majority of people do better by positive reinforcement.
Yeah. And that's, like, I remember playing in the Philippines, and I only played 2 games. I was supposed to play 10. I only played 2. And by the end of the second game, I was already done. Like, it wasn't nothing that I could do to shift that. I wasn't what they needed. They needed more. Yeah. But I was the best player that they had ever had over there. So they wasn't. Our mentality as American players are to get comfortable, play team ball, and fit in.
Mm-hmm.
their expectation of you is come over here and score every time, be Kobe Bryant, right?
Yep.
But don't alienate our players. So you have to be Steve Nash,
Yeah, you got to
and
balance that.
you got to balance it. So being a professional where you have the blame of not making all the shots, then you getting the blame for not getting everybody involved.
Yeah.
Then you have to get the blame for your attitude, whether you're winning or losing. And then you reflect on all of that and you say, I'm not getting paid to be dealing. Y'all not paying me enough to deal with this.
Yeah.
And that, can play a part on somebody's mental if they're not, they don't have the thick skin for that type of criticism. And often I did. I had it. I loved it because I could walk away from the situation if I felt like it was going left or right. I knew I had the resume to maneuver in certain areas. But I can only imagine for some guys that have to just stick it out and they couldn't really, use that, to their advantage. And it's just, it's a very humbling situation that you have to go through.
Yeah. No, and the washout rate is pretty high on the athlete side as well when you're talking about kids coming out of college in their first year pro. I had a kid a couple of years ago, went and played in Cyprus, played 3 games, got cut, called me when he got home, like, I don't want to do this no more. Like, I'm done. And, I've had a number of people like, why is he done? Like, he's so good. He doesn't want to go through that rejection, humiliation, just the pressure that comes with that. And, to me, I commended him a little bit for knowing himself well enough to be like, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't going to make me mentally happy. This isn't going to be how I measure my success. I'll measure my success in another way. And I thought that was really grown up and mature for a college age kid, essentially, to decide. But yeah, it's the hard stuff. Like, everybody thinks like, oh, I'm gonna go overseas, I'm just gonna make a ton of money. And it's, take some Instagram photos. The girls are gonna, swarm all over me and I'll be good. And it's like, that's
not even close. If you're listening, athletes, basketball players thinking of going overseas, you heard those stories. It's not like that, man. And I know I'm far more attractive than a lot of you guys, and I've been to a lot of places. I'm telling you guys, it's not like that, man.
Yeah.
They are scared of us, especially if you don't speak the same language. They don't want to take the risk of walking up and being embarrassed themselves. It's not a throw themselves at you type of party. You literally are alone. Yep. You are alone. You got to learn how to live alone, cook alone, go places alone. And if you find somebody on the team that can introduce you to some people who speak English or who like Americans, you get lucky because then you have people you can talk to, and stuff like that. But it's not an easy life, and people who live it now know it because we live in check to check. We live in season by season. The older you get, the more competition there is because these new guys are coming in looking for jobs, and we're not entitled to keep those jobs after you're 35. You actually are holding somebody else's spot who deserve it. And so it's important for us to take that conversation we spoke about earlier with the NIL and taking the education seriously because it sets these guys up now who are younger going overseas. It doesn't have the promise of making it to the NBA.
Yeah, because one day that ball's not going to bounce back up.
Not going to bounce. We have to set them up for something, in the interim. So I think the overseas aspect can give guys perspective on, hey, once this ball does, go out of air, I need to have something that can give me just as much joy because psychologically, if you don't got that happiness, you'll crumble.
Yeah. And, I've got a few guys on my roster now that are starting to set up, that post-career stuff even now, and they've got 6-8 more years of playing in them. One's doing a financial group and kind of giving financial advice and has a subscription thing. I've had guys move on and, they're selling solar stuff, and guys move on to be real estate agents and, athletic directors at schools and coaches and, actually helping a kid now do NBA interviews for NBA coaching stuff. So, you got to always have that next thing you want to do in mind,
Right.
because if you don't, 10 years of playing goes by quick, goes by super quick. And if you aren't ready for the end of it, it's going to be a rude awakening when you don't get a call to go play somewhere.
Right. So we're going to wrap up the end of the show with what I would like to consider the 3 T's. And I would like to ask you about the 3 T's. So when I ask you these, what these 3 words mean, just give me off the top of your head what you think it means as far as you personally, but also the athlete. What the athlete has to go. First thing come to mind, I'll say this word, boom. Tell me what you think that means to you as far as, your personal growth and what you see athletes see it as. It's going to be 3 distinct words. The first word is transition.
Ill-prepared. I think the majority of athletes ill-prepared for it. And it starts at the college level. You see college kids coming out now that don't know how to choose an agent. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. Some of them don't even have a passport yet. And even if you are a draft pick, you want to work out for Toronto, you got to have a passport.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. And, it really makes me scratch my head, and it's frustrating. And the wife and I have talked about, kind of doing classes of going to different schools and being like, hey, this is what to look for in an agent. This is what to look for in, management marketing. This is what to expect, for NBA workouts, and just a little bit of a heads up, because you guys should be getting taught that from college all the way through your pro experience, but you're not. And sometimes it's coaches failing them, it's the school failing them, it's the agents failing them, and it's the players failing themselves.
Absolutely.
Because most information is available at their fingertips if they just ask or research it themselves.
Man, beautiful, beautiful. Second word, transformation.
Personal growth, looking to make yourself better every day. And you guys do that naturally, physically, every day anyways. So that's easy. But the mental is what more guys need to polish, either making themselves more eloquent, more well-read, exposing themselves to people that, aren't in their ethnicity, aren't in their socioeconomic class, just step outside your comfort zone and interact with people, because we've got kind of the widest variety of people on earth here in the US. So there's no excuse for not knowing somebody from a different race, religion, different language speaker, different country. There's no excuse.
No excuse. I love it. Oh, that's beautiful. Last word, number 3, transcendence.
Pushing yourself beyond what you can do, to surprising yourself every day. If you can transcend a career, you can transcend basketball, you can transcend, even your school environment. But it goes back to the second word we just talked about, of wanting to improve yourself and showing how much better you can do, and pushing yourself even harder than individuals push you. If a coach tells you he wants, sprints done in this time, okay, cool. Tomorrow I'm going to chop that down by half a second.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like that's what makes people special.
Yep.
And that's how they transcend whatever aspect of life that they're in. Like Jordan and Kobe were transcendent because they were obsessive compulsive. Yep. Like they were just so obsessed with the tiniest, just weirdest details. Like Kobe talked about the difference of sound that a cotton net makes and a nylon net makes.
Yes.
How many people pay attention to that type of stuff? Very few. Or the new NBA ball, how it sounds going through a net versus the old end. Like people don't pay attention to that, but that's the obsessive nature it takes to transcend whatever career you want to do, whether it's playing professionally or being an agent. You just got to be obsessive.
Man. And everybody who's listening, that has been listening knows that, Jeremiah just hit on all three of our points: transition, transformation, transcendence. And not only did he hit on all three, but he hit on them exactly the way we've been teaching them. Exactly the way that we show you the transition has to take place. You take the first step, then you take the second step, and you become who you want to become, because you had to identify in the first step who you are. First step, identification. Second step, take the chance, become who you want to become. Third step, now you are who you wanted to become. Now you show the world. You have to transcend beyond all expectations, and you now have to be who you become. You have to be. You've already became. Now you have to live. Now you have to do. Now you have to share and experience. And in closing, it's so important for everybody to understand the mentality it takes to be an athlete. It's not something that just you can walk into. And I wouldn't promote young kids coming out to be professional athletes, because the mental that it takes to survive, we're not teaching our kids how to be mentally strong enough to survive in this type of business. And we're finding that these kids are becoming more and more distraught and destroyed through the politics of the business, through the mental side of, staying tough, persevering. It's becoming very tough on the kids, because there's no real reward when you have such an expectation that can be taken from you, from a coach not liking you, a GM not liking your game, or, you just being in the wrong city. There's so many variables that are not being told to these kids that could make their lives miserable if they don't have no plan. They just sit here, put all their ducks in a row and say, I want to play basketball and I want to do it. And then they get there and they're like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? And
just undiagnosed mental health issues, to where, one, we're men, so we shouldn't really talk about it. Two, you're a big, strong athlete, you shouldn't really talk about it. Just the shame that kind of comes with it. It's internalized shame, where I don't think anybody would think lesser of you if you did reach out and you did want help with it. Yep. But yeah, it's so internalized and not spoken about that guys self-medicate. Yeah. Whether it's alcohol or drugs or weed or it's something that needs to be addressed early on. But if you don't have the mental strength to deal with yourself on a one-to-one level, yep, what are you going to do with all these external pressures? Man. And when you start making money, people come out of the woodwork. You're a lottery pick, and they see, on the internet, you're making $5 million a year. Your cousin's cousin is hitting you up talking about, can you pay my cell phone bill?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can handle it for a short period of time, where you can fend off the leeches and you can identify who's who. But after a while, you become comfortable with knowing that you can do so much for people and they can take from you. And mentally, you can't focus on being the best of the best. Because if you're playing sports and you're not focused on being the best of the best, you can be easily distracted. Yeah. And there's only a few that have been able to focus on being the best of the best and go and achieve that. And that takes tremendous discipline. Such a discipline that this is all I talk about. This is all I think about. This is all I do. This is all I want to do. But when you get distracted from that, that's where psychologically it drains you, because you don't have a one single focus that can keep your priorities here, your energy here. And when you're being stringed along from different directions, your energy is being drained quicker. And that's where we, like you said, we're being distracted in so many different areas where the focus is hard. And so, again, in closing, I want to thank Jeremiah for coming on and helping us shed light on what the athletes actually deal with, but also what the agents actually deal with, because that's the most important part of the game today, is not just the athlete, their talents and their potential, but where they go, how they unpack that talent, how they unpack that potential, all plays a part on where the agent places them, where the agent sees their talent being used best and most, and then placing them in that situation to thrive, in a way where their talent can be used the best of their abilities. And I think Jeremiah gave us a lot of great insight on these young up and coming agents, these young up and coming athletes that want to be great players, that they have to have the mental toughness, you got to have the professionalism, and you got to be able to transition, transform, and transcend. I'd like to thank again Mr. Jamal Haylett, hoops attorney. And let us know where they can find you, bro. If we got any athletes watching, they looking for representation, whatever have you, how can anyone get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Gotcha. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, Hoops Attorney on Twitter, and then Haylett Sports on Instagram. Or you can just put my name into Google and you'll find me. Google's great. But yeah, I recommend, like, do your research, guys. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, don't go with whoever signs the most guys, or, whoever's got the star player you look up to and I want to sign with him. Look at New Orleans Noel, prime example of what's going on right now, because, just signing with, well, he's got LeBron, and it's like, cool, but, he's also got a bunch of other dudes that he's got to work for. And there's only so many NBA jobs. Right. So you get the leftovers, fella.
Learning lesson for all you guys out there. Go watch Jerry Maguire. Yep. Jerry Maguire lets you know it's not about how many athletes you have. It's about the connection and the ability you have to get it done for that athlete, and that athlete's ability to go out there and get it done. So with that being said, this is the Transition Podcast, Man to God. I'm your host, Rashad McCants, and we are out.